Teachers of Reddit, what was the moment you realized this kid is gonna be a serial killer one day? Story 1. Went to school with a kid called Michael who strangled himself in class with a shoelace. Like purple face and forcefully doing it. One time he broke his arm and had a cast. Got into an argument with another kid and he just started bashing him with the broken arm. Really hard. The teacher tried to get him to leave and go to the principal's office. He refused, so she moved the entire class next door and left him there. So he barricaded the door and started trashing the classroom. The projectile monitors, ripping whiteboards off the wall, flipping tables. After 30 minutes the police arrived and he was coloring in, bouncing his feet looking happy. Waving to kids outside the window looking in. The police broke the door down and he jumped on the table then attacked them. Never saw him again after that one. Dude was nuts. Edit, I remember too, before he barricaded the room an assistant teacher, for kids with issues, went in to talk to him and he started kicking/punching her. She ran out and that's when he started barricading the room in a fit of rage. Story 2. Was in my office one day when a kid I'd never met before strolled in. Very quickly I recognized by his behavior that he was a BD, behavioral deficit, student who somehow got out of his class. He started a conversation with me asking who I was and what I did. I could tell he was trying very hard to get under my skin as he emptied a box of tissues one by one. So I didn't react. He then kicked over a number of trash cans so I didn't react. He went in my office bathroom while talking to me with the door open, not to use it, and started messing with the supplies in there. I walked over so I could get a clear view. He then tried to pull the sink off the wall while telling me that he has compulsion issues and has a really hard time not doing the things he thinks about but knows are wrong. He said last year he was expelled from his school because he threw his desk at another student. He told me sometimes he imagines what it would be like to brutalize and murder someone. Eventually he tired and realized the sink wasn't coming down. I kept talking to him and asked if he would like to help me clean up the mess on the floor or if he wanted to go back to class. He helped me clean and then I took him for a walk back to his class. That kid took a lot of work over 4 years by a lot of people. Therapy and medication included. He eventually learned impulse control and learned the differences between craving negative and positive attention from people. He left BD and got to be in general classes, became an athlete, got some real friends, and graduated. I honestly cried when I saw him get his diploma. I hope he stays healthy. Story 3. 9-year-old chasing an 8-year-old with a brick in each hand trying to smash the other kid's skull in. When I stopped him he was screaming something about how he was going to kill the other kid. He's probably 13 now and I suspect in jail or killing animals for fun. Story 4. Preschool teacher for a very wealthy community. I have a 3-year-old who is physically violent. The first day I had him in my class he attacked me. I tend to get down on the floor and play with the kids. Seeing an opportunity he latched onto my ear and tore little bits of flesh with his tiny fingernails. I bled. I tried talking to his mom. She says, yeah, he gets rowdy. Just this past week I had him in my room again. He delighted in making another boy cry. Refused to participate in our activities. Only wanting to throw toys directly at my face. Once I did convince him to participate he clung to me. It was bizarre and honestly made me very sad. I talked to some other teachers who've known them longer. Apparently mom and dad are serious alcoholics. He is an only child and desperate for attention. They all know about his outbursts and violent tendencies but there's really nothing anyone can do because he is 3. I'm just going to try my best with him. Maybe a positive influence and some consistency will give this little guy some reassurance. I know that there are people who are mentally ill and born with issues beyond their control but I think this kid just has shit parents. Wish me luck friends. Story 5. I'd like to say there wasn't one defining instance, but more of a long list of them that when everything was over and I had time to relax and process everything, did I come to the realization that in 20 maybe 10 years' time I'd see this little boy as a teen or a man on the news for murder. I had this one student, let's call him Timmy. Timmy was prone to extreme violent outbursts for little to no reason at all, and they were so unpredictable that I had to set up a Timmy evacuation protocol with my other students in case I felt their lives were in danger. These are some of the times I had to use this protocol. Before Timmy was banned in my room from using pencils and safety scissors, he went on a rampage with a pencil. He was trying to stab another classmate because I helped her with her writing before him. He was doing his writing just fine, and seconds before that, I had told him, "Great job, Timmy, I love how you are keeping your letters on the lines." He didn't need help, and he never once asked for it. Thankfully, the little girl was not hurt as I was right there and was able to throw my hand in front of her face where he was aiming. However, he did get me and the pencil lead was left in my hand. Timmy attempted to choke another child because that child was using a red crayon, so instead of getting an identical red crayon from the bucket in front of him, he tackled that child out of his chair and put his hands on his neck while screaming like a banshee. About a week after the choking incident, he was upset because he wanted to be the only one in class, so he pushed a shelf that I, as a grown adult, have trouble moving over in an attempt to, in his words, squish his classmates who were working on the carpet. Thankfully, I was able to hold it up while they ran. He proceeded to destroy my entire room, to the point where I decided to just move classrooms for the day as it would have been impossible to clean it up, and frankly I didn't want my already traumatized students to come in and witness it. Every single day, this child would have a violent meltdown. Some were more contained to himself, a small area, or me personally. Edit, I am a UPK teacher. This child was 4 years old. Story 6. I've taught pre-K, 4 to 5-year-olds, 4 years. Only one kid has ever really scared me, and I wish I knew what happened to him. He'd be high school age by now. He used to talk about hurting animals a lot. We had several conferences with his family, but they swore he never did that at home and never hurt an animal despite so many times of him talking about it at school. He had zero effect most of the time, no smiling or laughing. He would be sneaky about hurting other kids, pinching or things like that, and have no remorse when he did something wrong and wouldn't deny it either. Completely dead behind the eyes. I've never had another kid like that. Even the violent ones who have hurt me or destroyed my room have had emotion and remorse at some point. Not him. Story 7. Not a teacher but a therapist who used to work for a state hospital for children, but now left. I had 4 kids. Kid 1. He was a 13-year-old who had severe aggression and ADHD. His parents were divorced, dad wanted nothing to do with him, and mom was an overprotector who was a holistic medicine dermatologist who demanded I call her doctor name every time I call her. Their son was hospitalized due to him beating up small children and fighting teachers. He was at my state hospital for a week where he would terrorize staff and children, and would cause lockout between security and him. I tried calling his parents, but his dad had our number blocked. I knew this because when I called him on my phone it rang longer. He answered, then hung up. When I called him again, it said number not in use. And his mom only answered the phone late in the evening outside of work hours. Mom would get stories about what would happen at work and she demanded to get a call from me. One day we finally got a call from mom and she's screaming at me on how she, sweet little boy, was a victim of society and I'm a horrendous therapist. She told the boy everything. The boy said, LOL, my mom said you suck. I'll be out of here soon. Mom removed him from the hospital where he was hospitalized by Child Protective Services again. The state called me to ask why did I discharge. I told them he was discharged due to parents removing him from program prematurely. Last I heard kid was in juvie and mom is trying to buy him out. 2. I had a 9-year-old who severe aggression. He held grudges and promised to kill other kids. He was sent to my hospital after choking a kid unconscious. I barely got back from a 3-week vacation and my supervisor had this kid unassigned for 3 weeks with no paperwork filed such as notes, intake, progress, and so on. They threw him in my caseload. 1 week later my supervisor demanded I release the kid because he'd been here long enough. I fought against it because this kid wasn't improving from what I heard. They discharged him instead. Kid was returned to us a week later after trying to kill the same kid again. 3. This kid was 12 years old who was exposed to porn and sexually molested by older women for 6 years because his father thought he was gay. This kid would masturbate in the hallway to shock people, grope other kids, sneak in a phone and watch porn loudly, try to remove the tops on some girls or pants them. He wasn't on my caseload, but the therapist in charge of them quit on the spot and walked out because they demanded help with this case and many others. She was denied. She left to protect their license in the long run. The hospital discharged this kid to a lower level of care where he tried to rape another client. 4. One kid who was 12 was the definition of a sociopath. He just loved to hurt other kids. He one day grabbed the balls of this kid with autism. The kid with autism shouted with a loud scream and beat the sociopathic kids to a bloody pulp. Sociopath kid recovers after 3 days, is readmitted to our program where he goes back to the same kid just to touch his balls again and gets a second black eye. He never cried, he never got scared, he just loved what he did. Edit, spelling. Story 8. She was a little angel student when my boss was in the room, but the second the door closed, she tilted her head, stared at me, and said, "I want to hurt you." Her eyes were absolutely lifeless. She was 8. She was also very frequently violent to me and other students/teachers. Story 9. His little sister annoyed him so he killed her kitten. Story 10. He wrapped both his hands around her throat unprovoked, he laughed about it and his mom defended his behavior. He was 8 years old. Story 11. 5 years ago I had a second grader who was horribly violent. I couldn't get a straight answer as to his home life and I was the new teacher so there was a lot kept from me. He would attack classmates with whatever was handy. Since I was the art teacher I'd see his class 1x a week. I had to pre-cut everything, not use pencils or brushes because they were potentially weapons. I learned by process of elimination what not to put out and my cabinets had to be locked. One day I caught him trying to stab a girl on the head, walking slowly arm raised, another time he had a chair ready to bring but down on another kid's head. I grabbed the chair and he full-on attacked me. Bit me, split my lip, punched, kicked. The principal let him walk it off. The following week he told his classmates he was going to try and kill me. Again, nothing happened. This kid had serious brain issues. The wiring was off. His eyes were dead or malicious. His movements were methodical for a child. I know that children who act out are usually victims of trauma, but this kid was born with something wrong. The worst part? Everyone knew he was dangerous but just basically ignored him. The principal told me to just watch him but not to neglect the other 23 kids. I left that shitty job. Oh, and fuck you Jennifer L., principal of the elementary school. You are a fucking piece of shit for allowing kids at that school to do whatever the hell they wanted with zero consequences. No wonder 8 of us quit that year. Story 12. Not a teacher, and do not know the outcome of this kid's life, but when I was in 4th or 5th grade, there was this older, wild troubled kid who rode our bus. He had curly red hair, always seemed to have scratches on his face, and he was unpredictable and creepy. We all avoided him. We were headed home after school when there was a loud scream from the back of the bus. Bus driver slammed on the brakes, and we all whip our heads around to see what the scream was about. The red-headed kid had attacked a kid in another seat, ripped a large scab off that other kid's arm, road rash from a bike accident on gravel, and was back in his seat chewing on the scab and laughing. As the bus driver approached the back, the other kid was bleeding and crying. We all realized in that moment that the crazy kid was genuinely dangerous. We never saw him again. Story 13. Maybe not a serial killer, but let me talk about James. Name changed. He would most certainly one day explode on society as things didn't work out the way he wanted. James was full of temper tantrums. On an average day he'd go through usually 2 to 3 over the most mundane of things. James was 5 years old, so should have had a grasp on this, but we'll go into why at the end. James had to be first in line, every time. If he wasn't, he was screaming, fighting, and in a panic. When we designated a student for first, he had to be second, and the same above would happen. When he was first, he'd push and yell at the other students. It made lining up hell. James would make messes and demand fairness. Oftentimes reverting in a hysterical temper tantrum of spitting, hitting, and crying if another student who was near him didn't also clean up. He had a weird way of eating with just his hands. It didn't bother me, but when the other teacher asked him to use a fork, he'd pick up the fork with one hand and just move it up and down while continuing to eat using just the other hand. James was clever and vindictive. Often asking to go to the bathroom when we were going outside, or the class was chaotic. When he'd go, he'd either steal something or break other students' creations. He also had a fascination with toothpaste and toothbrushes, especially of other students. He would often try to clean the toilet bowl with the other students, and dump the toothpaste in the bath. You'd think he'd be sick all the time because he didn't wash his hands, but he managed to build up a good immune system because James licked the ground, a lot. And almost everything else, especially if he was feeling vindictive or provocative. The hardest part though was the absolute lack of participation of his helicopter mother, who blamed everyone else for her son's problems. When we worked with the father, he and the other teachers created a present system. If he was good and listened in school, then he got a present at the end of the day. Father stored the presents in the car, but when the mother came, she didn't care and let her son open up all the presents, defeating the whole purpose. She also actively talked to her son about how much she hated the school and teachers. Which meant every painfully earned inch with her child turned into miles, and often the trust built between us was turned back. They were eventually expelled though, as the mother, to prove a point of her distrust, started to drop him into random classes in the school, ignoring some teachers, yelling at others, and pushing him in randomly to classes and leaving him like that. Usually mid-temper tantrum and curled up somewhere in the school for us to find or another teacher to deal with. Story 14. Kid was whispering shit to the boys he sat next to. Had no idea until one had a breakdown about how no one loved him and the others started bedwetting and having panic attacks about going to school. This was emotional brutality, and what the teacher referred to as the last type of bullying he was trying out before he would be isolated from the other kids if he showed no remorse. When this boy was spoken to, he smirked the entire time. Thought it was funny. Never wanted to punch a 7-year-old before or since. He'd make friends with stupid kids and make them do violent or damaging things for his amusement, then watch as they got into trouble. I went overnight from normal teaching assistant to policing that boy's every move all day. If his eyes weren't on his work, he was being told off. He was not allowed to interact with younger children or children his own age. Older kids didn't put up with him. It seems cruel, but he had been like this for 3 years, and every other option had been exhausted, to the detriment of every child this boy came across. The only interaction he was allowed was group work, and it was closely supervised. He was expelled from every secondary school he went to. His mother went bald from the stress. Parents were the sweetest people, they tried so hard, and he was in juvie from 14 to 18. He does multiple petty crimes and damaging things. Last I heard, he had to go into hiding because he organized a bunch of traveler kids he had befriended to help steal a quad bike. When they were chased down, the bike owner got macheted. The bike owner was his cousin and was a hard ass. It could be that he's actually not in hiding anymore and his cousin recovered and found him. Story 15. I've told this story before, but I was once watching two young students playing. Igor would put a box on Tom's heads and then Tom would take it off and they would both laugh. Igor repeated this a few times and finally Tom put it on Igor's head and Tom laughed. Igor, still with a smile on his face, picked up some Christmas tinsel, removed the gold bands revealing just a wire and then wrapped it around Tom's neck and pulled it back like a garrote strangling for a moment before I could break it up. It wasn't the only incident and he was expelled from the school after leaving scars from multiple clawings of other students. His mother in tears couldn't seem to understand the problem and blamed the school because we weren't strict enough and that he behaved well at home because of how strict the father was. They were 4 years old. A happier story, I had a returned student who had been cheerful and happy in my class, although with the occasional temper tantrum, come back after a stint in a public school, Vietnamese. It was like the charm and light in his eyes had gone out. He could still be motivated to work and pursued a lot of things, but if he felt slighted, like someone didn't like his drawings, I'd have to watch him closely as he'd find things other children loved or cared about and would destroy him. Projects, etc. It made me nervous to see such malice in my student, but still I searched for things to inspire him and keep him following the rules and learning in class. He learned I can't stand boogers though and would mid-temper tantrum attempt to rub them over everything, but still kept on teaching and working with him. After he left my school I kept on teaching him privately and over time found a great strategy for teaching him. Now we learn online and he chooses the topic, and we learn together via YouTube videos, games, etc., and he has burned through many amazing topics in history and science for the sake of learning English. We've done world history from the Peloponnesian War all through the Cold War, and we just recently finished learning about Justinian and his general Belisarius, asking questions about ruling, social policies, and navigating politics. He questions everything and comes back with curiosity and interest in the lesson in the same way when I started with him. I started teaching him at age 4 and he is now 11. Story 16. I have a kid, 8 years old, like that, in my class this year. All his time at school he has been a troublesome kid, hurting other kids without being provoked, unpredictable mood changes, and he's really hard to read. Lots of teacher colleagues say he looks dead in the eyes, no expressions of joy or any other emotions. The moment that really shocked me was when another student had found a fly in the playground. The fly was hurt and couldn't fly anymore. So this student gave it a name, Henky, and started to care for it, very sweet. Lots of classmates joined in taking care of the fly and helping it, making a house out of leaves, etc. I gave the kids some magnifying glasses so they could take a nice look and encouraged the kids' curiosity and gentleness. This kid also came over to take a look and was told to be careful, because Henky was the other student's friend. He looked for 2 seconds, grinned and stomped on it. Worst part is that Henky didn't even die, or at least it was still twitching. So the other student kept on trying to nurse his little buddy back to health. He even took it inside to read it a story. My heart just broke by the love this student was showing for this little creature, but the kid didn't seem to care at all about what he did. This was a couple of months ago, and he still even kind of brags about when he almost killed Henky. This kid just gives me the chills. Story 17. A group of boys gang raped a girl so bad she needed surgery. The boy's parents have kept this from going to trial for about a decade now. I would not be surprised if these rapists tried to have fun again. Story 18. I used to teach at a military training school, where the new recruits would go after basic training to learn their specific job. One student I had was insanely smart, like always made perfect scores and had a degree in some technical field. But he was super racist/sexist, showed no emotion, and said he wanted to have a *PE dungeon in his house someday. He ended up getting kicked out for insubordination and stalking. No idea where he is now. Story 19. The absolute callousness and coldness of how he interacted with anybody. He had no soul whatsoever. He was constantly suspended, kicked out, reinstated just to be suspended again. Zero conscience. The summer after his junior year, a girl who just graduated was found partially burned and stuffed in a trash can in town. I immediately thought of him. Turns out he raped and murdered her. He's in jail forever. Story 20. Not a teacher but was a student that had gone through an unfortunate experience, and I ended up being forced to attend the disciplinary school of my high school for a while. While I was there, I had to avoid one of the kids. He was just nutty. One morning while we waited for the teacher to arrive, no adult with the troubled children alone, uneasy face, the kid had ripped off some wood from something and it had a nail in it. He kept trying to slam my feet with the nail part and one other girl. He threw it when the teacher came up and the teacher just rolled her eyes and told us to hurry up and get in the trailer. Uneasy face. Thankfully I got out after 2 weeks instead of 2 months, embarrassed face. Story 21. Not a teacher but the meanest, most malicious, vindictive, manipulative child I ever knew growing up did not become a serial killer. Nope. She became an influencer. Story 22. So I wasn't a school teacher, I was a head teacher in childcare for 6 years. The first 2 years I was in the preschool room and floated to the older kids, 6 to 12 years, before I went to toddler permanently. I had this kid who was a foster child. Came from a really bad background. His mom had 5 kids. 3 youngest were boys and were his father's kids. The 2 older girls were his father's step-kids. Reading their reports I learned his father would rape the older sisters and mom would allow it, and he would beat the boys. Further reading, it stated this kid had microwaved their cat. He had bad behavioral issues. Further down in the report, when his social worker would come take them to talk to them, he ended up putting a chair through a window. In the classroom at the daycare he would purposely shit his pants. Tell other kids he was going to kill them and grab them by the neck. He's told me he was going to hurt me, with straight eye contact. He would fly off the hinges so bad my boss would have to retrain him until his social worker got there with police and his foster parents. I always said we were going to be on his hit list in a few years. Him and his brothers were adopted by their foster parents and ended up moving away. I don't know how he's doing now or what happened to him. He has obviously been through horrendous trauma and I hope he got the help he desperately needed before he ends up seriously hurting someone. Story 23. Had a student arrested for attempted murder. Only reason it wasn't murder was because the victim fought hard. I was 0% surprised when I heard it. Am not going to give any details, but within the first 5 minutes of interacting with this kid in class it raised the hair on my neck. I don't know how to describe it, but it's something about the way they talk, there's a cold confidence to it. They weren't very intimidating physically, which made it more unnerving to see that confidence in challenge and saying hurtful things to others. They don't talk to you as much as they talk at you. There was a pleasure they found in saying hurtful things to others and having zero remorse ever. He was also extremely smart and knew it. Story 24. Alt account, am a teacher. 1. When they would attempt to stab a student out of the blue. As in, no anger, no tantrum, no sadness, just sitting there calmly and then acting. And then having absolutely zero emotions after. Not crying, not having a tantrum, just blank. That emotionless void is the scariest. 2. The eyes. It's always the eyes. On a side note, blame shifting has been an increasing issue. As a teacher, I am obligated to first report to my higher-ups if there's any issues. Once they step in, my hands are effectively tied. Luckily my administration usually takes the proper actions, but other administrations have not, and it's frustrating. I've also seen it from the parent side, where parents assume that the teacher or another student has made their child make the bad decision, so the kid knows that their parents will back them up no matter what. Conversely, ones who have reacted so harshly over a minor thing, like forgetting homework, that you can see why the kid just gives up and does whatever the hell they want. I had a student a few years ago where the parents would actively brag about throwing away all of their holiday presents in front of them, because they got a B on a test. We called CPS, they found nothing. The student was savvy enough to realize that their parents were crazy, so they just did worse and worse things because no matter what they did, the punishment was extreme and over the top. Bottom line, parents have more sway than teachers over discipline issues that negatively impact the education and safety of their own child. If your child is coming home reporting of horrid tales about a child, confirm it with other parents, then start calling. Teachers can't talk to you about other children, but if you know how to read between the lines, they will often let things slip that they shouldn't. The teacher might tell you something like, "I understand what you are saying, and I urge you to call the principal and let them know your concerns." That's code for, "I'm not allowed to confirm nor deny, but please call and help me out here." The teachers have probably done everything in their power, and if the child is on an IEP or something, their hands are tied. Schools fear negative press, I hate to say it, but that's sometimes the only way to get a severely disturbed child out. Thanks for tuning in to AskReddit. We hope you enjoyed hearing the latest and greatest stories from the most interesting corners of Reddit. If you loved what you saw and heard today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the AskReddit community. You can check out more videos from us, you might like them. And if you have any amazing stories or experiences that you want to share with us, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a comment or shoot us a message and let us know what you think. We'll see you in the next video.